Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Thrive Co-Living Communities YouTube podcast. I'm Mark Stein, Thrive founder and your podcast host. We're creating sustainable, inclusive, and multi-generational residential communities. Our mission is to combat the epidemic of isolation, revitalize communities, and help others discover the many benefits of engaged community living by offering unique and ecologically sustainable co-living options. In this podcast series, join us as we discuss co-living, in addition to bringing you interesting people from around the world who are doing cool things to expand your knowledge and satisfy your curiosity. Through this podcast, learn more about our concept and see how Thrive co-living communities will bring together people from all walks of life who want to enjoy the best of independent and group living. To find out more about us, please visit our website at thrivecolivingcommunities.org. Thanks for watching and enjoy the podcast. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Thrive Co-Living Communities YouTube podcast. Glad to have you back and glad to have with me Brett Corbin, who is a financial advisor. He's with Raymond James. I'll let him tell more about what he does and his background, but he's headquartered in Louisville, Kentucky, where I used to reside and still visit regularly. So Brett, thanks so much for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Good to be here.
Great. So, one of the, let me do a disclaimer here. I know Brett professionally and from networking, and he is my financial advisor. So just to put it all out there. So one of the things that drew me to you as a financial advisor was your background in journalism and the business desk in journalism. Talk a little bit about that with the New York Times and
Sure.
Anything else that led you to this point.
Sure. So I went to college at Western Kentucky University and studied print journalism there, which sounds funnier each year that goes by because everything's so digital now. But grew up just loving newspapers and liking the thrill of a daily product there and the rush of getting it out and meeting the deadline. And I went to Western Kentucky, did a first internship with the Cincinnati Enquirer on the business desk, and basically nobody else at the college in my class wanted to do business. They were kind of scared of numbers and wanted to do either news or features. And my father grew up working in the business, so I was always around stocks and the market talk and things like that, so it didn't scare me much at all. And I also like the challenge of making business relevant to the everyday person who also might find it intimidating, because business impacts everyone's life whether you want to or not. And so that was always my goal as a newspaper reporter, was to make what might be a complex abstract idea relevant to people who are picking up the paper. So from there, hopped around the Midwest and worked for different newspapers. Here in Kentucky, I worked for Business First, and then up in Indiana for the Chronicle Tribune. And worked all around. Eventually ended up taking some time off and kind of doing a sabbatical, and went over to Europe to backpack around for a month. And before I went, I emailed the sports desk at the International Herald Tribune, which the New York Times owned, and said, when is there horse racing? I'd like to go see some. And a lady named Gina Rayrick was the horse racing reporter and also a business editor on the business desk of the International Herald Tribune. So she and I went to the track and had lunch and ended up becoming friends. And about 18 months later, a job opened up on the desk, and I was single and didn't really have much to lose to go over and try out for it for a week. And they liked me well enough, and so moved over there with about 2 suitcases and a backpack, and didn't know anybody besides Gina and a few other people, just periphery. And it was an amazing experience. I learned a lot about business from being an editor on the desk, and Time got better over the years living over there. It was a little lonely at first, but I ended up making some friends, and things turned out all right. And then at the end, the newspaper was just getting demolished by the internet, and so I could kind of see the train coming down the track. And being at that point in my early 30s, I thought, well, I should probably get out of this industry before, I hang around too long. And so basically moved on from that and went and worked in politics a little bit in Washington, D.C. for the 2012 election. And then eventually, after sailing around the United States for about 5 months, we can talk about that later if you want to, ended up joining up with my father about 8 years ago, and have been kind of helping him with the whole operation and trying to bring to it what I can when I can.
Good. Well, thank you for that. So, let's talk about your role as a financial advisor. And it used to be that financial advisors did stock picking all day. They would do the research, get themselves some expertise in particular verticals, types of business, and then advise clients. And that's not the business anymore for most financial advisors. And I think there's some liability exposure that brokerages are now aware of after lawsuits in the 80s, I think, mostly. So that there's not much of that. So talk about the role of financial advisor now, and what it involves, how much research it involves, or where you go for that information to advise your clients.
Sure. So yeah, like I said, my dad, when I was growing up, this was the 1980s and 90s. He was selling bonds that paid, 8, 9, 10% a year over the phone to people he barely knew, if he knew them at all. And so if they wanted to buy $20,000 worth of bond, he'd get their info and they'd do the deal, and he'd move on to the next thing. And he made a good living doing that, and it was easy doing that because, as we know now, 10% from a bond, I mean, we'd all kill our cousin for that. But basically, that's how he came up, and it was a very transactional business. Over time, people have asked more of their advisor than just, hey, call me up when you have a good idea. It's more kind of, not really, I wouldn't say it goes so far to be kind of a doctor, but it is more of a holistic approach to, what does this all mean? Why are we investing the money? What's it for? What are the next steps once I need to start drawing from my nest egg? So when I came on board, everything like that had started to, it was happening for several years, if not decades at that point. So basically that has been one of the things I've enjoyed about it, is kind of moving away from the salesy side of it and being more on the helping side of it, and really getting, peeling back the onion a little bit, and asking people, what does retirement look like? Most people say, I want to sit on the beach. Okay, I don't know if you've gone on vacation for, a week and a half or 2 weeks even, but it gets old eventually. And, you kind of start to want something more of it and a little more activity. So, I try and coach people through that. I try and coach them through, unexpected scenarios that might come up. And mostly that's a market drop, but it could be an Alzheimer's diagnosis for the spouse, or, here come the kids, they've boomeranged back and they want to live with you. And, like, these are all certain things that, most people don't really think about unless they have a professional who has seen a lot of different scenarios and a lot of different questions and issues, whether it's Medicare, Medicaid, what happens if I do work in Social Security. And, these are just questions that we help our clients figure out, because that's more of an important process of, and it's a more important goal than did we make 20% off a certain transaction. It's more of, hey, I have these goals in life. They're very important to me and my family. How can you help me accomplish those goals? And one thing we've been talking about as a firm lately is talking, our older clients, whether 60 and above, they've got kids that are, maybe in their early 20s or so. And so we've been encouraging them to have family meetings and kind of talk to the kids about what is coming down the pike, because you can see the statistics. I mean, it's trillions of dollars that's going to change from one generation to the next. And if you're not ready for that and it's a huge surprise, then it's going to be, there's going to be a lot of turbulence. And what we don't like in our job is any turbulence at all. We like things to be very boring and expected and planned out and thought through. And so those are the type of things that now I try and focus on, as opposed to just, thinking of good stock ideas or anything like that. I mean, of course we can do that. We've got great research down at Raymond James. They throw all kinds of stuff at us, and we pick and choose what we think is best and go from there. But they keep the menu pretty limited so that, they narrow down what we can offer to clients, whether it's, insurance, mutual funds, things like that, to a certain extent. So that makes our jobs easier, so that we don't have to go out there and diagnose and look under the hood of every single ETF or mutual fund or anything that we're talking about.
And then if a client asks you about a particular fund or stock, you're able to go to the analyst, or I don't know who your immediate person is that you go to, and they can fill you in and give you profiles and that sort of thing, right?
Yeah, absolutely. My favorite probably is, well, I really like our highly recommended mutual fund list. That is just a great thing to be able to draw upon, because our guys and gals from Florida, they go to the mutual funds and they meet with the people. They make sure the mutual funds stay on track with what they're going to do and what they need to do. So that's great. And then the ETF desk, the exchange traded fund desk, they're just fantastic. If you call them up and say, hey, I need XYZ, they'll be like, okay, yeah, that's good, but you should also look at this one because of this, and maybe try this over here. So, there's not enough hours in the day for all of us advisors to kind of focus on every ETF and mutual fund. But when you have guys and gals down in Florida, our headquarters is down there. That's all they do. And so it's great to be able to draw upon their expertise.
This makes you more of a financial advisor than a stockbroker.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Like a good example is Raymond James. The Department of Labor had some regulations that were going to come down about basically our whole business, and it was going to be a huge thing. And what Raymond James realized in the process of looking that over and figuring out how to comply was that they didn't really have a grip on their 401k business. Like, they didn't know how many they had, who had them, what people were doing. So they've come in, and unless you can show accreditation and experience, basically Raymond James is going to take your hands off the wheel to a certain extent as an advisor, and kind of say, look, here's your 401k lineup. We'll handle a lot of the different stuff that you should be doing. And so that way you can really reduce the liability that can be involved in a business like this. And so, yeah, it's good that Raymond James acts as not really a backstop, but definitely just a wealth of resources for us to draw upon.
What's it like? Draw a couple of profiles of your clients. Of course, not enough to identify for anybody to identify them, but do you feel like people do their due diligence, do research, or do they hear somebody at the country club saying, oh, I have this one, I like this? Do clients make their own decisions, or do they really lean upon you? Do they act emotionally when there's turbulence in the market? Just talk a little bit about what your life is like. Are you doing a lot of hand holding? What's your life like as an advisor?
Yeah, I mean, we get a lot of people. It's all over the board. I mean, you'll have Joe who watches CNBC and sees everything on there and then comes up with a list of questions. And, when we talk, he asks about all the different things on there, and that's fine. And then you'll have other investors who kind of want to talk about crypto or mem stocks and what's the latest thing on all the Reddit boards and stuff like that. We stay away from that type of stuff because that's more speculation than investing. There's a big difference. So, we try and talk clients back away from the gambling aspect of what we try to do and more towards the long term diversified investing that's shown over time to be the best way to go. We like horse racing and we like going to the casino occasionally, and that's all good and fun, but the best thing to do is just keep like a little sleeve of your portfolio, maybe 10% for, the companies that are just whims and are more of gambles than anything. So, those are some of our clients. And so that's been interesting to see. We've also got clients who just kind of say, hey, whatever you think is best, run it by me. And unless I have any big problems, we'll go with it. That's probably the majority of our clients, especially if they've been with us a while. They kind of get a feel for, the type of things that we're looking out for in order to come to them and show them. So it's a matter of trust. And yeah, that guy at the country club, he might have a good idea 1 out of 5 times, but once you get burned enough, you're going to kind of just say, yeah, that sounds interesting, and probably move on. And so we don't try and do that too much. We try and just hit singles and doubles and help people just grow their money and beat inflation, hopefully, and beat what they can get at the bank.
If they want to do some risky trades, or do you encourage them to go set up an account and do that sort of thing on their own? Or will you play along, and as long as they're not risking too much of their money, help them to manage that part of their portfolio?
No, I'll definitely help. I mean, I'm not scared of, taking some calculated risk as long as the person can withstand the volatility. That's our main thing that we have to look out for, is that, if something goes bad, what's the worst case scenario? Like, that's kind of what our job is to think about, while the client, on the other hand, might think about the best case scenario, and that's great too. And maybe we find like a middle of the road area. And so yeah, I mean, everybody's different. And if somebody has a whole bunch of money over in their 401k and they just want to kind of, my help picking out some long shots that maybe come in, I'm happy to do so. You just have to keep it in moderation so that nothing goes really badly.
Mhm. Cryptocurrency is pretty fascinating to me, and I've got someone that has come on a couple of times to talk about it, Paula Kaser, who I think you may even know, to talk about that. I'm not asking you to be a stock picker, but what are some of your thoughts about the fundamentals of it, of crypto, and or maybe what you anticipate? Do you think this is going to become a world? Well, it is a world currency, but do you think it's going to replace national currencies? What do you anticipate?
Anything's possible, and on a long enough timeline, anything is quite realistic, I would think. I wouldn't necessarily go too much into it, because there's so many sort of random actors involved, and there's so little regulation. And people in my industry and people in general like to complain about regulations, but they're usually there for a pretty good reason. And they usually, while they can be a pain, they can also be a big help in transparency and things of that nature. So, I see a role with blockchain, especially just in the transaction space, buying a house or buying a car and using blockchain. That seems to make a lot of sense to me. So I'd say that's one area. I know that's not crypto, but it seems to be involved quite a bit. So
It's related.
yeah. And so in terms of the cryptocurrency, we aren't allowed as advisors to invest directly into any of that. What we do like to talk about is the gold rush of 1849. when everybody raced out there to try and make their millions in the mountains, and the people who consistently made the money were the ones who sold the axes and the jeans and the pans and the horses and the infrastructure, So, that can be server farm companies, that can be sky cloud companies, that can be, different things like that. That's more of our way to not get around it, but to kind of play the infrastructure strategy, because that's being diversified, and that is betting on a sector as opposed to just an individual company. And that's always a good way to go about it, at least in my experience.
It's interesting to me that the people that advocate most about for cryptocurrency are critical about going off the gold standard and how it's not tied to anything real. With this, I think it was 72 withdrawal from the gold standard. But to me, this is 10 steps beyond. We're 2 steps beyond a gold standard and anything to have the currency rooted in anything more solid. And this is moving way off the charts in that direction. So as you know, and it's no secret, I've put a podcast out about Tesla and doing a bull case about Tesla. That's the company that fascinates me because it's so diversified as a single company. So that's what I follow mostly. And because of their mission to increase the rate of development towards sustainable energy, it aligns well with my values. So I feel really good about putting funds into that. Whereas cryptocurrency, and actually the last time we had Paula Kaiser on, we put the graph of the growth in Bitcoin compared to the growth in Tesla, and the graphs are very similar, ups and downs. So they track well together, but there seems to be through my research, a lot of stability with and substance with Tesla, as opposed to the amorphous nature of crypto. Anyway.
Right. I mean, it's a lot of the same people. If you're interested in tech, you're probably interested in crypto. And if you're interested in clean energy, you're probably interested in, non-traditional other things that, are interesting more so than, boring utility things or, sectors where they just kind of plod along. If you're looking for some breakthrough technology, you're definitely probably going to have a lot of those things in common.
Mm-hmm. Have you followed the growth of Cathie Wood and her investment strategy? Any thoughts about her as a phenomenon? I mean, she really has broken out. Of course, when tech started to take a dip, her funds took a dip as well. And I'm not asking you to advocate for or against her funds, but
Sure.
Any thoughts about her as a phenomenon?
I mean, I love the optimism. I think it's fantastic. I think if you look at all sorts of different parts of the economy and the technology that's coming up, like, we really could be on the cusp of some very exciting things, from healthcare to transportation to communication. So, no, I love it. I think she gets a lot of flack for maybe being too optimistic, and being a woman certainly doesn't help in this industry. And I sympathize with how she's been treated in that regard. But it's a sharp elbow kind of world, and she's come up through it, and I'm sure she can handle it. And she's done a great job, and I wish her the best. And I hope she's right. I hope it is, everything that she's predicting, because that would be awesome and super exciting.
Yeah, she's all about disruptive technologies. So
absolutely.
So we're here at the end of March 2022. With our COVID years, you got to really stop and think, where are we?
Right.
What is the date? and we're in the midst of the war with Ukraine and Russia. We've got interest interest rates starting to climb. We've got record inflation since the 80s, I believe. Talk a little bit about this climate today and what some of your concerns are, and maybe talk about each one of those separately.
Sure. I'll start with the Ukraine. So basically, we're at the 1 month mark here, and it hasn't gone very well for Putin, at least, on its face. Some people are starting to talk about, if he's got some diabolical, complicated strategy. And I don't know what that could be, because if you're losing soldiers by the thousands and tanks by the hundreds, and you're not really gaining much ground, I'd say that's pretty bad, just judging from a traditional kind of war perspective. I wish him the worst in that regard and hope that he sees the light and pulls back. And I think we've gotten some stability in the market the past week or so from other people thinking that as well. So hopefully that all ends and they can get a peace summit going soon. But yeah, it's been bad in a larger sense because, he just basically attacked a sovereign country who didn't really do much to, warrant that kind of behavior besides his historical thoughts on how it should be part of Russia and all that nonsense. So, yeah, I mean, that was kind of scary because, then other countries could kind of take that ball and run with it and think that there wouldn't be any consequences. So, just as an individual, I've been very happy to see the sanctions do, most of what they should do. And other regards, hopefully, maybe even he can step down from power. That'd be wonderful. So, anyway, I think you're starting to see a lot of that in the market with interest rates. Jay Powell has started to try to raise them, and I don't really get caught up too much in the interest rate world, besides that it's good to have a toolbox with tools in it. When he cut interest rates down so low, there's nothing he can do if we get another, pandemic or another crisis or something like that. It's nice to be able to calm everybody by saying, look, we're going to drop things by a quarter, a point, or a half point or whatever. So that's my main thing. I mean, interest rates are going to do what they're going to do, and everybody's kind of going to adjust to them as they demand to be adjusted to. So that's my main thinking on the interest rates. I think they're going up just like inflation's going up. And that's kind of the other thing where you're starting to see oil prices shot up quite a bit and they've come down. So that's been good. Commodity prices in terms of food, I think we're still in the early stages of that. I think those rates could go up for everybody. And that's unfortunate because, people didn't really do much and you can't avoid not buying food. So that's unfortunate. But I think inflation, and our experts agree that inflation will probably start to tick down eventually. I did like one thing somebody said: the cure for high prices is high prices, and that means that if the price of oil goes up, well, guess what? We're going to start pumping more, and the whole rest of the world's going to start pumping more, and in course of that, hopefully, the prices come back down. So supply and demand has a way of balancing itself out eventually, and so that's my hope, that the inflation does come down. But it has been nice to see people's wages go up with inflation, and I think that's a long time overdue. And so that's been nice to see. And I mean, I'm definitely not anti-business, but I do like seeing the average Joe be able to go out and switch jobs. If he can go get more money someplace else, then that's the free market. And I don't have a lot of sympathy for business owners who kind of maybe had their whole business model built on not paying people enough to live. So that's just my personal feeling on it. It's been good to see us average everyday people be able to kind of chart our own course a little bit more. So I know that's a complicated answer, but those are some of the things that I've been watching.
It really was, with this Russia thing, it really was a 1-2 punch. Here we were just settling down in many areas, if not most areas of the country or the world, regarding COVID. And then with supply chains disrupted, and then with this Russia thing, and Ukraine being a breadbasket to the world, pretty
Right.
much.
Right.
And Russia has control over a lot of rare metals. So it couldn't have happened at a worse time, that's for sure. You know,
Yeah.
I do think I saw an article saying that regardless of how bad war is for people, that I think the economy generally picks up during wartime. Do you know if that's true?
Yeah, I mean, it just depends on sort of, I don't know which war you kind of, I mean, that's a pretty broad statement, but historically speaking, it's a crisis at first and everybody panics and then we get used to it. And then there's a big rush, hopefully when it's over and people have to rebuild and get back to work. And, maybe some properties changed hands in the process and maybe better people are managing that property. That's specifically Russia. It seems to be the case. So, yeah, I mean, war is terrible and you always want to avoid it. But historically speaking, it doesn't really pay to get too freaked out about it. If you look back at different conflicts over time, there's usually a pretty good drop and then a pretty good bounce back. So, yeah, you just got to keep a long term perspective in anything, especially investing and planning for your retirement.
Um, one of the things that I noticed about the pandemic was that trends that were underway intensified and sped up. Look at video conferencing. We were forever talking about, oh yeah, we won't travel as much. We'll talk on our computers. We'll talk on our phones. But it took the pandemic to actually make that happen and speed that up.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if, and I have, because I follow Tesla and sustainable energy, I have heard some advocates talking about that the energy aspect of this crisis with Russia and Ukraine, and Russia only having, I think we only use 9 or 10% Russian oil and natural gas, but Europe is so dependent upon it, especially Germany. I wonder if this is going to, at this juncture, Tesla and other EV companies are growing, and even the traditional automakers are throwing their hat in the ring and pledging to do a lot more. I wonder if this will spur the development of electric technology, both for energy generation as well as transportation, and if that will be a catalyst to that. And isn't that ultimately one of the answers to be energy dependent, to have solar panels or wind powering our nations and other nations' energy supply and transportation, so that we're not dependent on the Middle East or Russia, for oil and natural gas. I know I've asked you several questions, whether it's going to speed up the development and whether that's ultimately an answer, if not the answer, regarding energy independence.
I sure hope so. I mean, I think it's kind of silly that we haven't been using wind and solar more than we have. But that's been a lot of ingrained in sort of how cars came up and the way they designed the combustion engine. It required, certain dirty fuels to process it and to make it go. And, once you're on that path, it's kind of hard to change course. But what I've seen lately is that solar and wind and alternative energy are the cheaper energy options. And so once that happens, just like there was no going back before in terms of coal and gasoline, once it becomes cheaper to have solar and wind, if you're running a business, you're going to go with the cheaper option. And so I think that's kind of the way that we'll start to see it change, hopefully. And if we needed a little kick in the pants from Russia to get going in terms of being independent, then thank you for that. And I hope it keeps going that way because, yeah, some of the climate stuff's pretty scary. And And if we can use literally the wind and the sun to do a lot of what we need to do, then by all means, let's go for it and save some money in the process.
And battery technology rapidly developing, mostly by Tesla, but or spurred by Tesla.
Yeah,
So that really helps as well.
absolutely.
Other are there other things that you think about and focus on macro or on a little smaller basis in regards to your work?
Sure. I mean, the aging of the world and our country is hard to not think about when I look at the ages of our clients, and you just see the trends overall. And so, that plays a role in transportation, it plays a role in healthcare, and plays a role in medical sciences and things like that. So I'd say that's one of the big trends that I probably interact with on a daily basis. And it's amazing to talk with clients who, 30, 40 years ago probably might not even be around. And now they're still sharp as a tack, and they're doing great. And so that's wonderful to see. In terms of kind of macro stuff, I think the pandemic's been pretty strange overall, but it has, like you said, made the world a little more connected, I think, and hopefully that can go a long way towards solving some of the bigger problems that we have as the world, deals with climate change and the aging of our population and things like that. So I'd say those are two things, and then otherwise, just trying to look at the diplomatic situation in various countries, and a lot of what the pandemic has done is it's kind of drawn people in a little bit more, but I think we're seeing a backtrack now to be more of an open country again, or an open world, thanks to Russia, because I mean Europe has never really been this unified since World War II, and that's kind of a silver lining of the whole deal. So yeah, you've got to keep a lot of things in perspective. But the world's getting better more than it's getting worse. If you look at some of the statistics, and the poverty levels are decreasing across the board. So, and the longevity of humans is going up. So those are positives. And it's easy to get caught up in the doom and gloom every day, but you also have to keep in the positives in mind, because if you want your money to grow and you're optimistic, then you have to be invested, and you have to kind of think about the good things.
Speaking of possible gloom and doom from America's point of view, anyway, we really haven't talked about the elephant in the room, and that's China.
Mm-hmm.
So what do I haven't heard any economist say anything other than, yes, China will be the dominant economic power, if not already, and they're growing militarily. What do you make of that? And do you think, there was Obama really worked to pivot towards an Asia policy to try to firm up our relationships in Southeast Asia and Australia. What are your thoughts there? Do you? I know you're not a political scientist, but you watch this. Putin, a relatively strong Russia and China together are mean trouble for the U.S. economy. So what are your thoughts on China, and do you think that they can grow and we can continue to grow and coexist? We don't smoothly. We don't seem to be heading that way.
Yeah, I think China was on a good track there for a little while, and they've kind of deviated from it. With the new leader, he's like a lifetime leader now. That's usually not a very good thing in terms of the health of a country, both economically and democracy wise as well. So, and then it's not just really an open economy. I mean, it's kind of a closed off, and it's nothing like America or Canada or Europe, where you can kind of go and and have some confidence in the regulators being objective to a certain degree. And, a patent will stick over there. Like, I think China's made some mistakes in terms of kind of wanting to be their own biggest friend, and I wouldn't say enemy per se, but they've definitely made some choices that aren't really going to be healthy long-term choices, in my opinion. You have to have democracy. Just as an American, I believe that, and I think that's where you get the free exchange of ideas and priorities, and where a country wants to put their priorities is usually where they end up going. And so you've got a lot of censorship going on in China. You've got a lot of sort of weird stuff going on where they're wandering around Africa and South America throwing money around, but that's not going as well as they hoped from what I can read. And so those are a couple things, but I think the main point that Putin showed to China, unfortunately for them, is that they can't just plow into Taiwan and do whatever they want, because there will be repercussions. So I think that's been one aspect of the whole Ukraine Russia part, is that Putin, I think China thought, okay, you go try it and see how it goes, and it's not going real well, as we've discussed. So I think China will probably start to make some changes to kind of be a little more self-sufficient with their economy and their currency and resources and things like that. So I don't know if it's going to stop them from trying to take over Taiwan. I hope it is, but at least we've delayed them a little bit, and maybe some good things will come in the time in between. But yeah, there's a lot of moving pieces there. We just as investors tend to stay a little more closer to home, a little more domestic based. It is a global economy, so it's kind of an old-fashioned idea that there's an international section and then a domestic section, and that's kind of out the window as far as I'm concerned, because you have all these multinational country or corporations that go around from country to country. So to say that one company is more international than another, I think there's very few instances where that would be the case, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Let's bring it close to home to Thrive. And I didn't mention at the top of the podcast that you're on the board of directors of Thrive CoLiving, and thank you for that and for your contributions there. But talk a little bit, and we're really getting far afield, but I'm sure that we'll come back to some of the things that we've talked about. We're trying to address this epidemic of loneliness that leads people to feel separate and trying to build community. One of the things, the consequences, I believe, of this separateness that people feel is that they feel like they need to fill it with something. And if we are separate, all living in our separate dwellings, watching our own big screen TVs, it's going to fuel consumerism to try to fill that hole. Not that buying things is bad, but for everybody to have a leaf blower in a subdivision doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So yeah, some sharing. So what are some of your thoughts on the micro and possibly macro level if our idea catches on? I don't ever think it would be more than 5% of the population that's interested in living this way. But what were some of your thoughts about Thrive and our concept that drew you to it?
Yeah, absolutely. So moving back from Paris to America was quite a culture shock, because I lived in this, it's a big city, Paris, but it was also a little neighborhood where I lived, and I had different people I'd see every day. And, it's a cafe culture, and people really didn't talk about their jobs too much. We talked about life and ideas and trips, and, I didn't drive a car. I was on the subway every day. And I mean, it sounds silly, but it was quite a shock to come back to America where, like you said, everybody's kind of in their own little bubble, and You don't talk to strangers and you don't really meet anybody different from you that much. And so, I mean, that's one aspect. I was reading an article the other day about the Jimmy Buffett Margaritaville land development, I guess, housing areas. And the writer is in the New Yorker. It's a great article. But he was talking about how, some of the people that moved there, they had done the traditional Florida thing where you move into the condo and you and your spouse walk along the beach every day. And, I don't know what else you do after that. But yeah, some of these people were saying, well, there's not really much of a community involved in that type of living, where as if you move to Margaritaville and Daytona Beach or wherever, you're going to have people that maybe you don't have a lot, everything in common, but at least they're going to be outgoing and open to new experiences and things like that. So I really do think there's a hunger in America that we probably don't even know is happening, by living these, secluded lifestyles where, you don't need a library because you can go to the bookstore and buy a book, and you don't need the local public pool because you have one in your backyard. Like, there's been a very weird, not weird, I don't guess, but a strong trend of Americans just being more and more walled into their own echo chambers. And guess what that leads to? Tribalism, to where, oh, I can't be friends with them because they're a Democrat or they're a Republican. Like, that's ridiculous. Like, that's the dumbest way to judge someone, because it's all just tribalism, and it's all what they want us to be divided about. And if me and you didn't know who the president was, it wouldn't make much of a difference in our lives. I mean, in some regards, and I take civil rights very seriously, and everyone needs to be treated equally and fairly. At the same time, I don't get caught up in politics more than it applies to basically daily life and the economy. And so, I think it's awesome what you all are trying to do, and I'm happy to be a part of it. And I think there's so many great aspects of living a more communal, like village life almost, that I think a lot of Americans it would be a lot healthier for them.
And I am living down in Florida in one of those typical condos, actually 2 stories. So old school, old Florida condo. And I was walking around there, walking my dog the other day. And I thought, there's no reason that a typical condo building we probably have 18, 20 units in the building, and then there are multiple buildings, that there's no reason that you could not have a co-living community from one of these buildings or a couple of these buildings. They don't have as much community space in this particular condo complex. There's a pool, but not a larger community space. So you'd need that. But as long as you could get together. So I think it's more a philosophy, approach, and attitude than it is a physical structure. And we're looking into all sorts of physical manifestations for the living quarters part of it. And in fact, I'll plug that we're finishing up I don't like the term master plan, and we've worked on some other language, but a template, if you will, for co-living communities, focusing on the different components of it, and not so much the residential component, but things like decision-making by consensus, mediation for conflict resolution, sustainability in terms of incorporating solar, and aquaponics to have some self-sustainability for the community. So by the time that this podcast is published and on the website, they'll be able to find a button and download an open source document that focuses on some of the fundamentals of co-living that anybody could just pick and choose between them. And of course, in the latter development stage, we hope that we're the best position to create something that we're imagining. But we do plan to put it out there for everyone. I'll also tell you that there's an international association of co-living communities, and that is coliv.org,
Okay.
co-liv.org. And I'm seeing amazing growth in this concept. Mostly it seems to be in Europe. In the US, it seems to be mostly on the coast
Mhm.
and places like Austin, progressive areas. But there was a program on co-living in Africa
Mm.
and the Nordics. So there's a lot of growth in this, not just here in the US, but and actually, I think we're lagging behind because of our focus on individualism as opposed to collectivism and cooperation.
Yeah,
But
and
there's
it's all about walkability too. I mean, I think it starts and ends with walkability and having people not rely on their cars and having a neighborhood where they can go to the store on foot and come back on foot and run out and go get dinner and a couple drinks and then come back. Like that's where I think America hasn't, in our downtown business district in Louisville, like they need to close some of those streets off and let people out in safety to just walk around and enjoy it because most people think back on their college days and they love those days because they lived and worked in a town where they could walk to places and that's wonderful. And I think we've really gotten away from that too much and it's really harmed a lot of our mental beings, I feel. So, and I mean, you can see it with the work from home movement. I think that's not about offices, that's about the commute. That's about people having to drive 2 hours to and from to do a job where they just sit in front of a computer. Like I'm, I'm not the biggest fan of offices, but I definitely don't think needless commutes are what can do anything positive for anyone. So yeah, I think that's great what you all are trying to do.
Yeah, and that's another one of those changes that the pandemic just burst wide open. And
Yeah,
now businesses are trying to bring people back, and people are really resisting.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
well, anything else I didn't ask you about or that's top of mind? We covered a lot of ground from co-living to China.
Yeah.
Um, anything else that you'd want to offer?
No, I mean, just a little commercial for our services. If you ever have
Please.
any questions, second opinion on anything, we're no cost, no obligation. If everything looks good in your portfolio, we'll give you a pat on the back and send you on your way. And if things look a little amiss, we might just give you a couple questions to ask your guy or gal, and hopefully, they can get on the point a little better. And if things look totally terrible, then we'll have that discussion too. But yeah, so just give us a shout. My email's right there. We answer our own phones, our own emails. We don't dodge anybody. And we just do the best we can for our clients, and we're fiduciaries. So we put your interest before ours, and we're fee based almost across the board. So that means that we're on the same side of the table as you all are. So when you do better, we do better. I think that's a much easier way to do this business than the transactional. I mean, that was my biggest hang up when I got into it, was just feeling like I was selling stuff and not really helping people. But once I realized, okay, no, these things and these strategies and these ideas can actually help people, that's when I really started to kind of embrace the job and see it in a different light. So, that's what we're about. And it's great to be here. And thank you for the invitation. And yeah, hope to see you soon, either here in Florida.
Yeah, go ahead and give us your email address and website, and uh, the particular Raymond James office that you have, and we'll put that in the show notes too. But give it to
Sure.
us here.
Yeah, sure. So my email is very easy. It's brett.corbin@raymondjames.com. So BRETTCORBIN. Phone number is 502-560-1226. And then you can find us at raymondjames.com/the Corbin Financial Group. And I'm on Twitter and LinkedIn, and we've got a Facebook page. So we're pretty easy to find.
Good. Well, thanks so much, and let's plan to do this maybe quarterly.
Sure.
Things change pretty rapidly in the world, and
Yes.
priorities change. The fundamentals, not so much, but I think it's always interesting to hear what's going on from your point of view. And I really appreciate you sharing, what life is like as a financial advisor. So that was particularly interesting to me.
Sure. Yeah. Happy to help, and it's good to be here.
All right. Well, thanks again. And thanks everybody for tuning in. We're now doing podcasts on a weekly basis. And we're also inviting people to join in and participate in the questioning. So we'll put down in the show notes a way to put a calendar, the Thrive podcast calendar, as an overlay in your Google Calendar if you have one. And then they'll show up and you'll be able to register to come in and participate and ask questions. And of course, they'll be placed on our website. And if you want to find out more about us and our concept, it's Thrive CoLiving Communities, plural.org, thrivecolivingcommunities.org. All right.
We should do a viewer question episode. If anybody has any economic or investing questions, send them to Mark. And if we get enough of those, we can answer some of those questions. That's always fun.
Well, and hopefully they'll be on live and they can answer their own questions.
That'd be great. So, yes, absolutely.
So hopefully that happens by the next time. All right. Thanks again, everybody. And Brett, thank you. And we'll see you next time. If you enjoy our podcast and the concept, there are many ways for you to support Thrive Co-Living Communities. Please visit our GoFundMe page to learn more about our philosophy and goals. There you can donate to help us develop our first co-living community, or share the link to spread the word about our mission. You can also support us while you shop using Amazon Smile or Kroger's Community Rewards Program. These programs allow you to support your favorite organizations while doing your everyday shopping and give you an easy way to help us grow. Finally, support us on Patreon and receive exclusive first looks at new podcasts, behind the scenes content, and other exciting promotions. We also encourage you to support other sustainable ventures. Check out Boxable.com, BOXABL.com, a company that shares our philosophy on affordable and sustainable living, and use our affiliate link to make your purchase. If you're a Tesla fan like me, you can also use our link for Tesla to earn rewards for solar panels or solar roof technology. By using this link, you can reduce your energy grid reliance and support clean energy, and you get $500 off the purchase of a Tesla solar roof, and we get $500 credit towards our purchase of a solar roof. To learn more about the many ways you can support Thrive Co-Living Communities, please see specifics down in the show notes below. Thanks again for your support, and we'll look forward to seeing you on the next podcast.